Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Wednesday, the 23rd of November. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined by the dream team this morning. First of all, Joshua Barrie. How are we doing, Joshua?
Good, yeah. We're almost on time, Derek. We do seem to get a lot of flack for our timekeeping on this show, but...
Yeah, and quite right too. CGM55 says, does this ever start on time? I do apologise. There's lots of intricacies before we go on air, folks, but we're here now to talk all things Rangers, which is why people are tuning in. How are we getting on, Stevie? Where is it? You were talking off air. You get absolutely drenched taking your dog out for a walk earlier.
Yeah, dropped the kids off at school and then took the dog out. And it's one of those ones where you open the car door and she looks at you as if to say, really? Are we really doing this morning? But yes, we were. And I've discovered that my nice shoes actually are leaking. So
Wow.
my feet were quite cold and wet. But it's my fault we're late. We were gossiping off air about new manager stuff and that. So I take the blame for that one, guys. I apologise.
Yeah, no problem at all. Right, let's talk all things Rangers. Well, before we do that, actually, you can see the little ticker below, folks, and the link is also in the description. Our Black Friday offer is on just now. It really is a sensational deal. You can take advantage of 6 months' worth of content for just £1. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe to take advantage of it. You won't be disappointed, I assure you. There's so much content on there just now. With regards, of course, to the big news on Monday with Giovanni van Bronckhorst being dismissed as Rangers manager. Lots of pieces on there about who could replace him as well. Of course, Michael Beale is the front runner as it stands. And Joshua, your piece on this tactical philosophy is doing well on the website. A lot of fans are looking forward to a potential Michael Beale in charge of Rangers taking over from Van Bronckhorst. The pros and cons of this, every managerial appointment is a gamble. Of course it is. Would you be for this appointment?
Yeah, well, I should just say while we're on the topic of the website, Derek, we've got so much content on there from the last few days, everything from opinions about the end of Van Bronckhorst, numbers from it, why it didn't work, to potential new managers scouted, Stevie's opinion, a long read on Michael Beale's philosophy, got other Michael Beale content obviously from when he was here in the past, as well as a number of other things today. So do go and take advantage of that. Just £1 for 6 month, link in the description. Definitely, hopefully won't regret it, because there's absolutely no money and you're going to get loads and loads of content for that money. Beale, yeah, we've spoke about this a few times, Derek. There's not really a front runner in the way there was with Van Bronckhorst this time last year. Obviously, around that time, there was a couple of others names touted, but it seemed like there was quite a unanimous verdict that Van Bronckhorst was the manager that people wanted. I think Beale, if he was 10 years down his managerial career, then he would maybe be in the same position with Van Bronckhorst, because Van Bronckhorst obviously had went away to a couple of other clubs by the time he came back to Rangers, although he wasn't there as a coach in the first instance. So I think there's an element of reluctance about that. But then if you look at the pro side, having worked with these players, you know the type of football that he can coach. Although QPR are 7th, they were top at one stage. They went through a bad run. He was obviously wanted by Wolves as well. He's obviously an excellent coach and would be able to coach Rangers to play a style of football that can be effective domestically. Any appointment at the moment, though, Derek, is going to be a risk, because if you go for someone who's perceived to be a safe choice, or someone who the board and the club know, or who knows the club, then you could end up in a situation like Van Bronckhorst again. If you go for someone who perhaps is a little bit more left field, but is more experienced, has managed at a higher level, are they going to be able to adapt to Scottish football? So you can see the pros and cons of both sides. But as I say, I think with Beale, what will go against him, and some opinions at this stage, is the fact that he's not managed that long. What will go for him is obviously what he did at Rangers and his reputation as a coach, which is obviously so high.
Yeah, he certainly seems to be the front runner, Stevie. Now, some of the comments coming, and it's not a universal point of view that everyone's in agreement that they would want Michael Beale in charge of the football club. I think we touched on it a bit yesterday. There is, of course, a degree of risk with this. He's only been a manager in his own right for a few months, of course, down at QPR. He's doing relatively well. You'd have to say he's on a pretty poor run at the moment, but I mean, these things happen in the Championship. It is a marathon, not a sprint. However, can you understand the reservations some Rangers fans may have about this type of appointment?
Yeah, absolutely. But as a Rangers fan base, we couldn't agree on the weather half the time if we looked at the window together. So it doesn't overly concern me. I understand completely what people are saying with regards to his experience and, his kind of lack of managerial time. But Steven Gerrard was completely untried when he walked in the door and he revolutionised the club in the 3 or 4 years that he was there. So I completely understand what people were saying, but I think that to get experience on the job, it can be just as valuable as having it coming into it. But you know what, Rangers is a unique job in terms of what you have to do, and it's different to any job anywhere in football that you have to win every single game, and that's it demands a draw and a defeat is a disaster, kind of thing. So Michael Beale understands completely where we are, and I understand that the draw that he would be for the boardroom. So Beale also is very good on the pitch, on the training pitch, and he can get the best out of the players. So that's what the boardroom will be thinking as well, in terms of who can we get in that can coach this squad? Who can we get in that can coach the best out of these players? So I understand it from that point of view. I understand the reservations, but we spoke about this yesterday, Derek, in terms of whoever came in. You could go and say the other front runner, just for example, was Knutson of Bodo Glimt, and he's one of the ones that's been mentioned quite a lot. I could sit here and say that there's a risk from him because he's never been out of his country. He plays a really attacking style of football, concedes a lot of goals. His win percentage isn't very high. You could make a negative kind of angle for anybody that was linked with the job. So we just need to wait and see in terms of what happens. The way that some of the football that we played under the title winning year under Gerrard and Beale is obviously the attraction there. But there's also other years where similar things to this season happen. So if it is Michael Beale and if that's the route we're going to go down, then I would hope that Michael Beale was able to come in and have his own say on the squad and not be so favourable to some of the players that have repeated the same cycles that we're seeing. So I can understand the kind of trepidation from people that might worry that would be the same thing. But listen, there's pros and cons to absolutely everything, and I don't think universally the Rangers support will agree on much anyway. So if it is him, I think, or if it, even if it's anybody else, we just need to get behind it and try and support it the best we can, and hopefully whoever comes in can try and get a tune out of this players and his squad.
Yeah. Listen, folks, I need to dive off the video just momentarily.
Wow.
I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Master Joshua to steer the ship at the moment. Hopefully, we'll be back shortly. So, Joshua, you are on the oche, buddy.
I'm in charge. This is an insight into Stevie, an insight into Derek Clark's wild lifestyle where he gets calls from interviewees during a podcast. I was going to come back to you and say, I remember this time last year speaking a lot about when Van Bronckhorst came in and changed the type of football that Beale and Gerrard had been playing, and thinking this is a breath of fresh air. I remember that game against Livingston where they won 3-1 and there was wide wingers and it was different, it was faster, because let's not pretend, although Rangers were 4 points ahead at the top of the table by the time Beale and Gerrard had left, they hadn't managed to kind of reach the heights again that they had playing wise the season before. Now, increasingly, I kind of think, and I don't know if you listened to Beale on it was the BT Sport Curry Club podcast. Yeah. Just a number of comments that have come out in the last year. You think of Goldson after that League Cup semi-final against Hibs, the 3-1 defeat. You think of some of the players and the way they've trended ever since the 55 season. And Beale was kind of mentioning, is there one or two players who, for them that title win was what they'd been working towards per se. Definitely the final in Seville last year was that as well, and more refreshment has been needed. So looking back on that summer, will they think, well, if we'd had a few more players and if we'd managed to get a Veerman if we'd managed to just freshen up the squad a little bit more, then that lull wouldn't have happened. And another interesting point I want to put to you, Stevie, which I was going to go with when Derek asked me, Beale wasn't the manager under Gerrard, and although he had a lot of influence, we had a lot of influence in the training pitch. Gerrard made no secret of the responsibility he placed on Beale. Beale ultimately wasn't a decision maker, and I think that's an interesting topic when we're discussing maybe the lack of variation or Rangers doing the same thing too much under that regime. Do you think Beale could be more flexible when he is the number one boss in there, especially looking at what happened when the two of them split up with Villa and QPR this season? I mean, I'm going to look a bit at QPR today, and I'm interested to see how much he is willing to change and adapt things, because I think towards Gerrard's end at Rangers, that kind of was a bit of their undermining the fact that they didn't mix it up enough for me.
Well, you're not wrong with regards to when they left. If you remember the Hibs game where Gerrard famously responded, at full time to the 2-1 victory so passionately, which is very much unlike him. There was a lot of pressure on him and on the management team at that point because things weren't great, particularly rather on the field. So again, I understand it, but it's interesting. See if you take Michael Beale's comments from the Curry Club on BT Sport and what he said about players being at the end of their cycle and things like that. I can understand. What gives me then a wee bit of kind of hope is that perhaps Michael Beale is more than well aware of what needed done and what needed freshened. And if he's then coming into that, he albeit there's a year difference, we're still in the same position, more or less, that we were this time last year under him. So, sure, there's been there was 7 that came in, as well as James Sands, but largely it's the same squad, and he'll know what he needs to do, who he can get the best out of, who needs to be moved on, and he'll be well aware that there's big decisions and hard decisions to be made. So, there is. Look, I mean, there's pros and cons with everything, and being able to change. I mean, this is going to be the big thing. If Mick Beale comes in and we go rigidly 4-3-3 and there's not a massive change, then we'll still have the same issues unless he's able to rip up the squad and get the players he wants in and things like that. But it's the same for any manager that comes in. Would Sean Dyche, for example, be really rigidly 4-4-2 and we talk a lot about tactics and we talk a lot about style and things like that. But the bottom line is, whoever comes in needs to win, Joshua, and that's the absolute bottom line of it. Rangers Football Club is built for winning, and if you're not, and when you're winning, these things kind of get overlooked because as long as you get the 3 points, we keep going, and it's the same thing here. Whoever comes in, if they hit the ground running, people won't worry about styles too much.
Yeah, I'll put a few points to you, Stevie. Adam Beanie Smith saying if Beale is turning down Wolves, he won't go to Rangers. Wolves have spent about 300 million on the squad. William, I'd be happy enough with Beale coming in as manager, but he needs a strong, experienced backroom staff with him, which I believe he does have. I think every member of his QPR backroom staff are actually older than him from memory when we interviewed him in the summer, William. So that fits into your point there. John says we need a manager with experience, not another project that takes a couple of years to get it right. Another point I wanted to put to you, Stevie, was the way that Beale, it struck me again in that BT Sport podcast, and it's well worth a listen to if you've not done so, folks. He made very confident comments about the league title. He said effectively that although maybe a defeat in an Old Firm was on the cards because Rangers hadn't been beaten in, I think, 7 or 8 games by that point, he thought they had the upper hand in that fixture. I think his quote was, there was no way that anyone was coming past us. Beale might not be an experienced manager, but I think what he would have to his benefit, Stevie, is the fact that he almost knows how to play the game from a communication point of view. He knows what messages trends well. And if you compare that with Van Bronckhorst, who perhaps is more straight and doesn't think as much about how to play certain situations, you obviously cast your mind back to that Ajax defeat and those comments, which kind of haunted him until he ultimately lost his job a few months later. Do you think that's a fair comment, that although Beale doesn't have, again, he doesn't have that experience, he's not a managerial figure like Gerrard, he would understand, I guess, the impact of his press conferences, how to communicate, and he's obviously confident in his ability, and that in the situation he'd inherit if he was to come in, whoever comes in, they'll have to have that, because Rangers they've looked fragile in recent months, and you can't have that, especially when you're 9 points behind the top of the table.
I think Michael Beale, overall, as well as that point, I think Michael Beale would be more than aware of what the demands are at Rangers Football Club. He's watched them almost every game since he's left. That I've been in contact with him, every now and then. So I know that he's kept up to date and up to speed with exactly where the club is, exactly where the players are. So it's a difficult one, because for me, it goes back to what we said a wee bit before. The whole Michael Beale conversation. He is a risk. Everybody's a risk. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was a risk. So whoever comes in now, I just think that this board, it has to be a home run for them. It has to be a home run for Ross Wilson, especially. So that's why I think I've thought since this happened and since day one, they would look towards Michael Beale. So with regards to his message and things like that, I think that's a fair point. And it just comes back to what he comes in, and yes, he's inexperienced, and yes, he doesn't have much managerial kind of years in the job. But Mick Beale's been in Brazil. He had a grounding at Chelsea. He's worked at Liverpool. He's now been manager himself at QPR after a wee bit at Aston Villa. And for 3.5 years, he was very much the man behind the scenes at Rangers. He was very much the man on the training pitch. Steven Gerrard was the figurehead. He was the one that took all the responsibility on. He was the one that did the press, etc. Michael Beale also managed Rangers when Steven Gerrard had that COVID outbreak for the week. So he took them to Europe, where we won against Aleshkert. It was 0-0 over there, obviously. And then we beat Celtic at the weekend in the 1-0 game. And Mike Beale was completely in charge of that. So he knows the expectations. He knows what he would need to do. So I'm quite comfortable in that. And yeah, I mean, listen, I do have a soft spot for Michael Beale. I think that's quite clear. I've always had that. And for me, he's a really great guy. And I would back him to be able to take this job on. So I don't want to put myself completely out there and say that, he's the number one choice and things like that, but for me, there's pros and cons of absolutely everyone that comes in. Michael Beale, and obviously we've spoken about him quite a bit so far this morning. He comes with the experience and the know-how of what the demands are of the job. And he also comes with a very good insight into where this squad were this time last year, which I believe we're still in the same position. So he will tick a number of boxes for this boardroom, should this be the way we go down.
Yeah, and obviously we'll speak about some of the other candidates before the linked potential candidates, I should say, before the end of the show. But it's probably important to note as well, Stevie, that what is such a big factor in this conversation is, as you allude to, where the squad are. I think for a while it looked as though Van Bronckhorst had managed to give this squad a new lease of life, certainly by making a few additions in the summer. That's an opinion most people would have held after that win away against PSV in when was it last? It was August, end of August. But looking at the squad now, I mean, I've done a piece for the website today discussing a few different systems that the new manager could use. And you're struck by, firstly, how light Rangers are at the base of midfield, just how impactful these injuries have been. A number of players, someone like Glenn Kamara, Alfredo Morelos as well, who were at such heights under Beale and Gerrard in that 55 season and look absolute shadows of the players that they were since, and lots of factors will come into that. I certainly don't think the Van Bronckhorst football suited Glenn Kamara week to week, and Morelos, as we know, has had his separate issues. Whatever manager comes in, Stevie, there's going to have to be additions in January, and with 10 players, I think, out of contract next summer, there's going to be a real overhaul next summer. So it's a difficult job, not only because you have to, in the immediate term, stabilise, but you're going to be part of a big rebuilding process, which, it absolutely needs to happen next summer, Stevie. And I think all the evidence shows that more of it should have happened the summer that's just passed.
Yeah, and I think that's been a kind of universal. That's been something the Rangers support has agreed on. I think we all thought that this rebuild should have came, a lot sooner than it is. It's now more or less been forced upon us, but that's where, possibly somebody with insight into the club has the upper hand in terms of they know exactly where these players are that are coming out. I don't think that we can go another summer where you renew McGregor, Arfield, Davis, Jack, etc. I think these players will possibly run the race. So it's going to need to be big, brave decisions over that. And you're also looking at as well, could Michael Beale get the best out of Ryan Kent? Could Michael Beale get the best out of Alfredo Morelos? Well, he already has. So that'll be a big draw for the board, potentially for them as well, because these are two massive assets. And would these players want to play for Michael Beale again? And the answer most likely there would be yes. So there's a lot of kind of little factors that play into the wider thing. And then you can look at it the other way and say, well, you've got a manager coming in that would maybe be a wee bit more cutthroat and decide that these players have ran the race and they do all need to go. So whatever way, you're absolutely right, Joshua. This squad is at the end of its lifespan. There's some players there. You mentioned Glenn Kamara. I don't have any inside knowledge to his kind of position, but I can only tell you what it looks like from me. And I think that from the summer when he didn't get his move, I think it's looked like a player that doesn't really necessarily want to be here. And that's difficult. So there is big decisions and there's a big rebuild. And when you go back and you talk about the injuries in Van Bronckhorst at the end of August, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has been extremely unlucky. The loss of Tom Lawrence, the loss of Connor Goldson are absolutely massive. Any new manager, when it gets to the kind of end of January when these lads are back, will get that new bounce. Then you get Yanis Hadji coming back. You've hopefully got other guys around it that's going to reinforce it. So a new manager instantly gets that kick as well as being the freshness of whoever comes in and stuff. So it is time for a rebuild. I think Joshua, that's completely clear. But it's something we've discussed as well, that this squad perhaps is a wee bit tired and has run its race. And I don't think that's been unfair, and we don't need to criticise or individualise anyone in terms of who should go and blah, blah, blah. I just think as a collective, there's big decisions to be made.
Yeah, of course. We should obviously put across the other side, because as much as there'll be people who do want Beale, there'll be people who think that is the wrong decision. Positive Vibe here saying, why are we not looking at proper experienced guys and winners?
Most of them, can I just say, Joshua, most of them proper experienced guys and winners are all in jobs. So there's not an outstanding candidate available for this Rangers job at the minute, and we're not in a position to go and pay 3-4 million for somebody that might be in a job. So there's a small pool of candidates that are there, and none of them have experience and winning mentality kind of stuff like that suggestion. I completely understand it, but I just think if there was an obvious attraction out there, we would certainly go and get it. And I'm not sure there is somebody that fits that.
I'll come back to you with this one, Stevie, because I think this is a great point by Alan, who says we must stop trying to make the past work again. Now, taking what you say there, Stevie, the job market is, as you say, Rangers aren't going to go and probably buy a manager out of his contract for millions and millions of pounds. We know some managers in there maybe have more of a track record than others that have been linked with the job. But is there an argument that this is, Rangers didn't refresh in the summer when they should have? I think we're in agreement about that. And that's one of the factors for me that came back to bite Van Bronckhorst. Do you think there's an argument that this is when Rangers should be trying to kind of have a break from the last few years, trying to start a new cycle, a new manager with no ties, with no connections? Is there an argument that they should be doing that and they're still trying to cling on to, what brought success a couple of years ago and get what they can out of that? Is that a fair argument, or do you think the fact that Beale's his own manager now, it's not as if it would be the same management team, that doesn't kind of hold up?
No, I think that's absolutely fair. And I completely understand that. And I completely understand. And part of me agrees with having a freshness, a new style, a new identity, perhaps a new formation, new ideas, a new culture at the club. I completely understand anyone that would say that. And that's why I've tried to be kind of level in terms of saying to myself, don't get all your eggs in one basket. Don't push out on one person to come in. I need to be broad-minded and realize that it might be somebody that comes in that I'm completely unaware of his style and what he will bring to management. And that might work better than going down the route of somebody that we know and it's got ties and emotional ties in with the club. So what Alan says there and what people are saying on social media that might not want Michael Beale or might want something completely new. I agree with that. I get that completely. And for me, that's 100% fair. And I understand that argument. The one there about making the past trying to work again, that's kind of relevant managerial side and for the playing squad, I think, because what we've maybe done there is tried to prolong a couple of people that we shouldn't have. But hindsight, look, is a wonderful thing. And I don't want to come on this show and bleat on the same things every day about my feelings about recruitment, and stuff like that. But, there has been mistakes made. So hopefully whoever comes in can rectify that. But the point that Alan makes and the wider point of people maybe not being 100%, I completely understand it. And I understand and agree with those viewpoints. So I'm not shut off to anybody else, Joshua. I'm not all in for one person. I'm not all in for one other kind of, one way style and stuff like that. I just think that, we need to be broad-minded and kind of see who does come from here. And when they do come, just, basically go all in and welcome them and try and get behind them. So it's not been an enjoyable last few months. PSV was the high. And since then it's been particularly difficult to not only watch, but to be a fan and support through it. So, the change has been made now, and it's vital that what we do next really is the correct decision.
I want to talk about some other names then, Stevie. We've given a good amount of airtime to Beale, and obviously, as you say, there isn't a real front runner, but I think Beale is certainly maybe the name that's being mentioned most just in the discussion at the moment. So I think it's justified to spend a good bit of time speaking about him. But of course, there are some other names as well, which I'm going to read out to you. Domenico Tedesco, someone that obviously managed against Rangers last season with RB Leipzig. Knutsen, Dyche, Hasenhüttl. I mean, in my opinion, I think where Rangers are at the moment, they need to. It's difficult to sift through the argument of they need someone who maybe knows the club, because if you look at recent experiments of people who haven't known the club, obviously Caixinha, Le Guen, Van Bronckhorst did, but he was, he hadn't played in Scottish football for a number of years and therefore was coming back. So I guess he's kind of got a foot in both camps. When all these names are coming up, Stevie, do you think it needs to be someone who knows the club? Because my opinion is that Rangers need to get the best football manager, because the best football manager will give them the best opportunity of winning games. And some people may say, well, that's naive. Look at the games you have to go away to Pittodrie, and the teams you have to break down at home. Oh yes, they're all unique. I completely agree with that, but they are also football games. Although at times I think Scottish football can not be the most glamorous on the eye. I still think playing the best football, the most effective football, will give you the best chance of winning matches. From the names outside of Beale, Stevie, who perks your interest the most? Who do you think could potentially make the best next manager at Ibrox?
Well, I don't have a massive knowledge of Domenico Tedesco, but from what I've kind of seen, he liked to play a progressive kind of attacking football style of football. So I understand that people might kind of gravitate towards that. There's been another few names. Ralph Hasenhüttl. I don't think that's even remotely possible. The amount of money he was on, and I think maybe he would take a break and command like a Premiership job. So I don't think that's one. Sean Dyche is the obvious potential one, and you get the old throwback draw to the hard-lined British tactical, organised. The ability for his team to go up to Pittodrie on a midweek and kind of grind out those results, that's the kind of mentality that draws you towards him, because you think he would be like that. So he's probably one of my front runners, in my own opinion, in terms of what I might like to see.
Stevie, I'm just going to interrupt while you talk about Dyche. I'm going to plug my laptop in just so you don't think I'm abandoning you. But you give me a minute on Dyche, and then I'll be back to give you the counter.
Ah, yeah, no problem. I thought you were going to say there was breaking news or something there, and that would be the second time that's happened. But no, when we talk about kind of Sean Dyche, I understand that might be an appeal for people. I understand perhaps the freshness of somebody like Domenico Tedesco that's been mentioned, that different style, that different culture, that different formation, that different kind of attacking style, all that. Like, I completely understand it. And then, the other, Ralph Hasenhüttl been mentioned, as we spoke about there. Guys like that, perhaps guys like Kevin Muscat as well. I just think that's slightly too much of a risk in terms of where this board are going to go. Goes back slightly to only my own opinion and what I said before about this board needing things to be a home run, which is why I think they'll stay fairly safe. I think that Sean Dyche is a safe approach. I think Michael Beale is a safe approach because you're really sure of what you're getting. Obviously, Ross Wilson's worked with both of them before as well. So some of the names that are being mentioned are a bit more exciting, but I'm not sure that they're completely realistic. People were talking about yesterday, some of the names we had yesterday, Thomas Tuchel, Rafa Benitez and stuff like that. That's elite level management that aren't coming to Rangers on minimal kind of budget or minimal wages. So we're not going to be able to get guys like that. And I truly believe that if we could, we would go and get them immediately. So I think that we have a pool of names that have been mentioned that will be there and thereabouts. And don't forget that the club, relatively do business quite well. There might be other names that are in there that we just don't know about yet. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I think, from all accounts, the club are moving on with things. Stuart Robertson and Ross Wilson are in London at the moment. So interviews and initial discussions and things like that are ongoing. And we just need to wait and see. I don't think that the board will just meet with one person. They didn't meet with just one under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst when he was the clear favourite. He did want the job. He did apply for it, etc. So I still think, Joshua, that there's a wee bit of work to do, but I do also think that we'll get an answer to it very soon.
Yeah, and I guess the opposite side to Dyche is, if you're saying, okay, there's drawbacks to Beale because he's not been a manager for long, while Rangers won that title, they, maybe you could point to their cup records. It wasn't brilliant at the end. You could point to Dyche and say, yes, maybe he'll give you X, Y, and Z. He'll understand it. He'll fit the prototype of what some supporters want out of a manager, but has he been tasked with the type of games that he's going to face at Rangers? Maybe he could bring in a first-team coach like Gerrard did with Beale and be that statuesque manager that I'm not saying that Gerrard wasn't involved tactically, because obviously he was, but we know how much of an influence Beale had on the training pitch. But I think there's risks attached to that. If you go for someone who's not been involved in Scottish football, there's risks attached to that as well. Someone like Tedesco, I think, is a really exciting name, but it's a difficult situation that whatever manager will come into inherits. More difficult, I'd argue, than what Van Bronckhorst came into last year, because he was still 4 points clear at the top of the table. There was, I think, still an expectation that Rangers could go on, or a confidence that Rangers could go on and win the league title, which was certainly extended by the run up until the winter break, which was obviously brought forwards at the time. Could have been more if not for that. This season, the manager will come in with Rangers 9 points behind, as I say, with that huge overhaul needed in the summer regarding out of contract players, and that doesn't include players that are on loan as well. So that will come into, I'm sure, what type of manager that Rangers opt for. A few comments saying, who's your favourite? And honestly, I don't know at the moment, because it's hard to pick out of that list. But I think what my general opinion would be that, again, aside from all the requirements people have maybe about a certain type of manager or the requirements of Scottish football, I just think Rangers in the last few months, their chance creation hasn't been high enough. And I don't think that's had anything to do with the nature of Scottish football. I think that's because maybe the way they were coached just didn't break teams down enough. It wasn't quick enough. And maybe, as I think Johnny outlined really well in a piece, Stevie, that Van Bronckhorst's philosophy would be better suited to when he does have to adapt to opponents like in Europe. And it's not all about his team setting the tempo and playing quickly and breaking teams down. I think Rangers need a manager who's going to be able to coach a football team to be really exciting on the ball and create a lot of chances. So that would be, I think, the top requirement, number one for me. I know someone I'm just seeing in the comments there, Gallardo as well, another name mentioned. There's lots of exciting names out there that maybe aren't that much of a potential, but a Turkish manager or a manager in Turkey, who I'm going to find his name because his name escapes me as well. Stevie, just as we're coming to a close, you're saying there that you hope it will be done in the short term. How important do you think it is that, I think we're in agreement that Rangers need a manager in place for that game against Hibs, which is in about just under a month's time. So there's plenty of time for that. How important is it that this process is done quickly? Because Rangers are 9 points behind in the league and have a game against away at Pittodrie and Dingwall, both areas where they dropped points last season before the Old Firm on 2nd of January. It feels like a real sliding doors moment as well, where if a new manager comes in and gets a few positive results, the January window's there, maybe something can be achieved from this season. Otherwise, if it drags on and he doesn't have that time, because again, another factor, sorry to go on, but another factor within this conversation is they have a mini pre-season, which Van Bronckhorst didn't have last season and is quite rare at this point. So how important do you think it is that the manager is in place for when the players come back from holiday, so that he has that time to work with them, not only to build confidence, but get across what he wants them to do and try and help them win those games before Christmas?
Well, the players come back a week today, so they're due back next Wednesday. So I believe that a manager will be in place by Monday or Tuesday at the latest. So all going well, I think that the new manager will be here. I think that we'll most likely hear over the weekend about it and then announced at the start of next week. That's how I envisage things going and how I would hope. So it's absolutely vital that a new manager gets in time and has that potential to work with the squad, evaluate who's available, evaluate, training wise and try and get back on the pitch and kind of go from there. So yeah, I mean, look, I think it is vital. I think it would be really, really unfortunate if we went into the likes of Leverkusen home game, like the Swansea home game, or the Swansea behind closed door friendly that has been kind of mooted as it has been, on as well. I think that's on the 3rd. So I think we need to have people in place by then. I think that it gives the new manager an opportunity to assess before December and also then begin to build. With regard to salvaging something of this season, Derek and I spoke about this yesterday. The cups have to be the main focus in terms of silverware, and league-wise, you just need to try and get into stride. You need to try and be able to go to the difficult places like Ross County and Aberdeen and pick up wins, and then just keep chopping away and see if you can put a run together, see if you can build confidence. I remember Alex McLeish, when he came in at this exact same time, was in a very similar situation, and he managed to win a double, and he chopped away at the league. I think he went maybe 15, 16 games before he lost at Livingston away 2-1 in his first defeat. So we need that same similar kind of bounce. We need to try and claw back anything we can. The Old Firm matches, we need to try and put a stamp on them and build for the future as well. So there's plenty to play for. And the manager has, the new manager coming in knows that the pressure of delivering a league title, for example, this season isn't there, because the expectation isn't wildly high for that now. So they have that on their side. But and way back to the original point, it is vital we get somebody in, and I do believe that by the time that the players come back a week today, somebody will be in.
We're rejoined by Derek Clark.
Sorry, lad.
Flying visit. Derek, I'll just play host, just get your final opinion. We've spoke about lots of things, as you can imagine, all the different managers, but the final point being, how important is it that Rangers get that manager in by the time that the players come back from the break, so he can treat that mini pre-season as a time to get them best prepped for getting points before the Old Firm and trying to keep this season, not only the league title salvageable, if not it's not really within touching distance. 9 points behind at the moment, unless Rangers go and win that Old Firm game. But also doing well in the cups. There's a cup semi-final in January, I think it is as well. How important is it that they're in place, as soon as possible to have that mini pre-season?
Yeah, I think everyone was sort of Stevie's dog just getting in on the act. There it is, absolutely fantastic. No, I think it's an ideal time. I think everyone would sort of be in agreement with that. I think if a managerial change was to happen, it would be at this point in time. It gives a new manager plenty of time to bed in, get his new ideas put onto the players. Of course, the next competitive game isn't until the 15th of December, so a good few weeks yet to integrate and get their feet under the door. It'll be interesting if it is Michael Beale, what his backroom team are going to be as well. But listen, I think Rangers, as Stevie says, I think the league, in my opinion, is a long shot at best. It's effectively 10 points of difference with Celtic's superior goal difference. So certainly the cups, I'd be looking at adding to the cup haul. Scottish Cup was brilliant last season, long overdue. League Cup, Rangers have underperformed and of late, there's no doubt about it. So I'd be looking for it. There has to be improvement, hasn't there? And usually when a new manager comes in, you do get that new manager bounce. So you've just got to hope that will be the case with this festive run of fixtures leading up to the Old Firm game as well. So yeah, I'm interested to see what's going to happen. I think that there will be a bit of movement this week. And like Joshua, I'm sure, has told you folks, just stay tuned to our social media channels and the website, and we'll bring you all the latest with regards to who's going to replace Giovanni van Bronckhorst.
Yeah, absolutely great. Well, remember, folks, you can subscribe just £1 for 6 months on the website. Right now, we have all the content you could wish for regarding not only the managerial search, but Giovanni van Bronckhorst's reign, and amongst other things. You can read about Michael Beale's tactical philosophy in there, how a new manager might set up, just £1. And if you do watch us on YouTube, that gives us a lot of support as well. If you could subscribe and like the channel, that would be excellent. Keep the notifications on in case we go live at any point during the day. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we'll speak to you tomorrow.